Three, two, one. Hello, Isabella. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, that's all good. Okay, so I guess a little bit about myself. My name's Isabella, and originally from Medellin, Colombia, and I'm 25 years old, and I've moved to Australia when I was 20. So yeah, I've been here for 5 years now. Currently work in a small independent newspaper called Cairns Local News in the far north of Queensland here in Australia, basically where the Great Barrier Reef is and all of that stuff. And yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I guess my native language would be Spanish in case some people don't know. Yeah.
Sure. Wonderful. Very nice background, and I like that you positioned that in Australia as well with the Great Barrier Reef, so people can imagine some nice pictures.
I think so. If you
Wonderful.
if you say Cairns, nobody knows where
Yeah.
it really is. So.
That's true. That's true. Wonderful. Perfect. Okay. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into what you mentioned with your work in journalism, which to anybody listening might be pretty incredible, given that, of course, like you said just now, English is not your first language, which would be Spanish, but yet you still work in journalism in English, of course. Can you tell me a little bit of the background behind that? Has that always been something that you've been interested in?
Um, my story with journalism is not one that's very like I don't know if interesting, inspiring, I think would be the
Mm,
word. It's not very inspiring. When I was about to finish high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I had an affinity for humanities and social sciences in general. And I don't know, I remember some people said, "Oh, you would be a good like journalist or good for communications and things like that." And I didn't give much thought to it. I just saw it as the possibility of maybe writing and things like that. So I was like, I'll give that a try. And my dad's a lawyer, so every time I went to like uni admission tests, I would put, journalism as my first choice and then law as my second one. And then I learned I hate law, but that would be later. Um, so yeah, I think mostly I always was interested in social sciences and humanities. I really enjoyed history when I was in school and like yeah, just social sciences overall, philosophy and all of that. But I kind of knew philosophy, I would probably starve if I was a philosopher,
yeah.
especially in Colombia. Like I knew my prospects would probably be becoming a teacher. So I don't want to teach. So and yeah, so I kind of just gave it a try and um it just stuck, I guess. It's something that I'm still kind of figuring out myself. What areas I like, but I did realize that I had a passion for telling stories and it's nice not having to be you on the spotlight kind of thing, but listening to all of this greatness around you and witness it and be the one who can put it on paper or digitally as things are now. So I guess that's where it all started, yeah.
And do you have any favorite stories that you've heard over the years?
Well, I have this memory, I guess. Well, now that I work for a newspaper, I do a lot of news, and I'm not a big fan of writing news. For people who work in this area, they know that it's very structured. Anybody can eventually write news. I mean, there is still a certain kind of skill and knack behind writing in general that makes it a little bit more difficult. But in a way, news are the easiest, I reckon, to learn because it's so structured. So for people who are in this area, know that there's the five W's, and basically, if you attach yourself to that structure, you'll be fine, right? So the what, the where, the when, the who, the why, and then the H, that would be the how. So it's the inverted pyramid kind of thing. You give people at the top what they need to know and then go with the other stuff. So basically you want to lead people on with your first paragraph has to basically catch your reader, but also tell them almost everything they need to know.
Mm, okay.
Um, yeah, so wait, I forgot. What was the question to begin with?
If you
You
have
got
any favorite stories?
yeah. So I'm not a big fan of news. I enjoyed much more when I was in university and I could write feature. So when I was back
Mhm.
in Colombia, I had things very inspiring. Well, he was scary, so I think that's what made him inspiring. We all wanted to get on his good side. It kind of felt that if he said that you're a good writer, you were a good writer. Like he doesn't just say that. And so one of our first assessments with him was we had to look for a news story and find a way to make that news story a feature story. And I pitched several ideas to him and he really didn't like them. And walking home and everything, I kept seeing this poster of a man that was missing. And I was like, well, this isn't exactly in the news, but I mean, it is newsy. Like, this is something that newspapers would cover. So I pitched that to him. He liked it, and I called the number, which, yeah, he led me to this man's son. And I got to interview him, which honestly was very nice of him. Like, he doesn't know where his father is. I'm not I wasn't the media, right? I was just a student. But the guy kind of opened up to me and was willing to tell me his story and everything, although it probably wouldn't really do anything for his attempt of finding his father. So it ended up being an amazing experience overall, just because he was such a good source. I feel like he was what journalists dream of, because he just gave you this amazing quotes. Like he was just so gut punching quotes. He would be like, oh, remembering songs and that um about missing people and how he had been a bad son and he felt like this was sort of a punishment, but he was just an amazing source and such a nice man, and it ended up being one of my favorite things that I wrote, and my professor really liked it as well, so it kind of really boosted my confidence as well. Obviously that was in Spanish, so it's a whole different ball game here, but it would be one of my favorites, yeah.
Okay. And I like that connection that you made, and I did want to dive a little bit deeper into that. What you mentioned that was, of course, in Spanish, like you said, and then writing in English has been a very different story. And this is something that we briefly talked about last time, but if for anybody listening, could you tell us again a little bit about how you started to learning English, where your beginnings were?
Yeah. So basically, in Colombia, it's compulsory for kids to learn English. So as long as you're in primary school, whatever, you have to, up until you graduate high school, you have to have English classes every day for an hour. Honestly, it's not the best quality English, and a lot of people finish and don't really have anything but the very, very, very basic um, English. So I realized when I started school that I kind of had a knack for it, that I was good at it, and I was really curious about it, I think. Um, so besides that daily hour, which obviously helps, like I'm not gonna lie and say like, oh well, I just did it all on my own, an hour every day for like 10 or so years, obviously it's going to help you a lot. But again, it's a kind of a compulsory system, so I feel like they just get like they just think we'll give you just this, we limit ourselves to this little box here, just so that we can say that we did it, kind of thing, and then you go on with your own thing. So besides that, I have an older brother, and he really liked listening to music in English. I feel like music will always be my greatest connection to the language. I'm super passionate about music. And I had a cousin who had like a great taste in music, and she would make us all of these mixtapes and CDs and everything. And there were all of these amazing songs in a language that I can't understand. And so it kind of became a passion of mine, like filling in gaps in things that I didn't understand. And I made up my own words, as most people do, things that sound kind of similar to whatever it's being said. Until that wasn't enough for me. And I started feeling like I want to know what this is saying. And I feel like I was also kind of a cocky kid. Like I was good at school in general. And back then I really like was so proud of that and I wanted to show it off. So I always liked to just in what I was good, which was English, not math. For example, I was really bad at math. So I didn't try to show off, but in the things that I was good at, I would try to show off. So it was nice going to my English class and being like, okay, well, I know this and this and this word, and I've listened to this song and I know what it says. And in kids fashion, look what I can do. So um, that's kind of how it started. But I guess it really helped having my brother as well because I looked up to him so much that it was kind of like if he listens to that, I want to listen to that. If I see him singing, then I want to sing that too, and I want to sound well when I do. And same with movies, like most movies that still that we get in Colombia are still American movies. Um, so yeah, I think media played the biggest of the roles and in me wanting to understand English. And so I remember for my English classes sometimes they would give us like they would print out a song and they would leave with blanks in it. And sometimes you don't even know what the song says, but you're just filling in blanks. I would just take that paper home and be like, okay, I don't know what this word is. And I would look at it and now I know. And now it makes sense. And I just like that feeling of it making sense. Like I
Mm.
connect better if I know what's being said. So I know a lot of people connect with melodies and everything, but I connect to lyrics. So um that was kind of the way. And when I was in year 9, I had this very, very good English teacher who really, really cared about us and everything. And we hit it off because I was actually interested in her class, unlike most of the people, because everybody thought that it was kind of like you see an elective in university or something like
Mm.
that. You think it's not important. You're filling up time and space kind of thing. So that's how people mostly see it. But I loved her class and she was the first teacher I had that had good grammar, good spelling, good pronunciation, everything. And so I really looked up to her. And she offered me a position with a friend of mine to be like some sort of monitor for um, some other kids younger than us. So we had like morning students and afternoon students. And so the afternoon students tend to be the kids that were a bit more on the complicated side of things, lower income and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's cheaper studying in the afternoon. So they come from a little bit, lower educational standards as well. So they really struggle with English. So I started on the weekends giving classes to kids in year 6, 7, 8, and 9, I think. So basically, she would tell us a topic, yeah, what we had to do, and we would do a little research as well into some practice exercises that we could give the kids. And we prepared obviously with her beforehand what if we're studying, I don't know, past perfect or something, we would study the structure of the sentence, how it will work, subject plus this plus verb plus whatever. And so I would prepare those classes, and I guess that helped a lot as well because it made me more aware of actually proper sentence structure and
Yeah.
and grammar as well.
And just for reference, what you mentioned with the year 9, is it the same, let's say, system, I mean, grading system as Australia, or how old would you have been in year 9?
Yeah, so it is high school, and it is as it is in Australia, pretty much. The only difference is Colombia doesn't have year 12. So I was 14, but only because I was younger than the rest of my classmates. So everyone's
Okay.
15. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then so with your background with English, like you said, having that pride in understanding and in really having that grasp of the language, what was your experience when you first got to Australia and you're like, yes, I got this, I'm good at this, and then the new accents and the new way of speaking and the new vocabulary and so on and so on. What was your experience with the first few weeks, I would say, in Australia?
So prior to that, my family and I, we traveled a couple of times to the US just for holidays. So that was the first time I actually got to test my English, like speak it and be like, do people actually understand me?
Mm,
And I realized they do, and that's a huge step because I feel like that's everyone's biggest fear in the beginning. Am I gonna be understood? And obviously, am I gonna understand? But I think that when you're trying to make your point across, it's so scary to think, I know what I'm saying, but nobody else is. So I already tested that out. I knew I could survive, basically. And I knew maybe it was overconfidence, but I knew I was good at the language. And so I knew I wasn't so scared of my, yeah, day-to-day interactions. It was more the idea of going into academic English because I did
mm,
have to do the IELTS test to be able to go to uni in Australia. And obviously you have to, pass with a certain grade. And I had to get at least like an overall mark of 6.5, which is actually not very um it's not very like above average, which you would think it's kind of weird, but and I passed everything very well except for my writing because I had to do an academic writing test, and I thought it would be just like any other thing, and that was when I first kind of crashed and realized, oh, it's not as easy as you think. So that was my lowest mark. And I did, when I first got to Australia, I was worried about the accent. Like I knew the accent was going to be different. We're taught American English, and there are some differences in accent and obviously some in vocabulary, which are a bit easier to come across than the actual pronunciation, I feel like. So I did do like a short English course when I first arrived. And I guess it helped a little bit. Just I don't even remember the things that we were doing or what I learned because it was more preparing people for the IELTS, and I had already done the IELTS and passed. But I feel like it gave me more confidence that I could sit down in a classroom and know what to do and understand my professors and all of that. But it was still nerve-wracking, and I missed speaking my language. I didn't think that was going to be a big deal because I kind of wanted to test myself. But I did realize it was a big deal missing being able to speak in your own language because there's still so much. I guess the part that people don't tell you is all the slang and all of the meaning that gets lost when you don't understand slang and just sayings and all of that stuff that you do have in your own language and that you can also put across. Um, so I think that's what made me miss my language. It was the idea that they have these jokes and these little things that are not funny to me that I can't understand. Some professors did some jokes in class, and I was like, well, I don't understand the context of them. I don't understand the news context of them and the pop culture context of
mm,
them. And just overall, the slang, Australians like to abbreviate everything. So, instead of a cup of tea is a cuppa, and they don't say, well, late afternoon or what do I know, but they say arvo. They don't say avocado, they say avo. And they don't say sandals or flip-flops, they say thongs and things like that. So, um, a lot of meaning in the beginning got lost. But for me, it was like, okay, the first point was, can I survive? And then I was like, I can, until the first essays come, and then you start questioning yourself
yeah.
again. Yeah.
And I like what you said, and I would like to come back to that. You mentioned that it was that overconfidence that you had that, like you said, you went into IELTS, whatever, I'll do it because I can. did that overconfidence, like you said, stem from that previous story that you had with it, that okay, I was good at it, like you said, that you always had that feeling for it? Would you say that's where it came from, or is it just a part of your personality in general that you're a very confident person?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
I'm an overthinker and I self-doubt myself in everything. But English was one of those things that, people had hyped me up so much, like throughout my life in general. Like I remember like going on trips with my family and there being foreigners, it could be even in Colombia, but like going on family trips and going somewhere different from my own city and foreigners being confused, and I was like, I can help and try and translate for them, and them saying like, "Oh, you speak very nicely and everything and your English is really good." And so I guess that's kind of like the validation that I needed and wanted. But also just overall my teachers and friends and everything, everybody kind of hyped me up when it came to the language. And again, it's easy to do that when you think about the fact that none of us actually do speak the language. So I feel like people are very easily impressed. So I think it stemmed more from that than anything else. But obviously I got knocked down a few notches down. Um but yeah, overall, I still didn't feel like, oh, I don't want to talk, I don't want to speak up, or I just want to give it up. I think I never was on that level, which I guess made things much easier for me because I know some people do feel really embarrassed of like all the accent and the pronunciation, and I know I'm saying this wrong, because I know how frustrating is that feeling that you have to say it and you're saying it wrong, but what else can you do? So I knew I was good enough that I didn't have to go through that, but only because I've tested out throughout my life before.
Sure. And that's a very good point for anybody that has that, like you said, that internal overthinking that, oh, am I going to say this wrong? Like you said, the first point of gaining that confidence is actually trying yourself out and seeing if your thoughts are actually true or if it's just your brain telling you, oh no, you're not good enough. But then you try it out and then you see, oh, like you said, people understand me. I understand people. I can survive. Nice.
Mhm.
Certainly,
Yeah, I
certainly.
think so. I mean, I think a good, for example, tip is if you're a person who's online a lot, that's the best place where you can test it out. Like, I know a lot of friends who are gamers, for example, and because you're playing with people all over the world and nobody's actually seeing you and you can just trash talk and things like that, it's so easy to test out how good you are if you can, make your point and people get you. So I guess it's things like that. I got to test it out in the real world, and I guess the universe presented me with a lot of scenarios to do so. Um, so yeah.
I want to also touch on coming back to what we were also talking about last time because to me at least, this came as a big surprise when you said this, and I'm sure to anybody listening it will be as well, that you've had situations where people would treat you differently when they found out that you were not a native speaker, despite you not really sounding like a non-native speaker. I mean, like you said, the vocabulary that you use, your pronunciation is incredible for a non-native speaker, and yet just that mindset of, oh, her language is maybe not her first one, and then people just automatically treating you differently. Could you tell me a little bit more about those experiences and maybe how you got over that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess Australia is a very diverse country. They won't get surprised by your background, by your ethnicity or anything, because here all cultures like, just live together. But it all kind of changes when you move from the status of a traveler or a tourist to the status of a student or a professional. And so, and even not even like a student when you're around campus, but the moment when you become the student who's doing assessments or you have to do group assessments, right? People want to be set up with other people that, can do well, right? That's nobody likes doing group assessments. And so you want to be paired up with people who are gonna, show up and do the job. And so there's a lot of stereotypes running around uni when it comes to group assessments or like working with people. For example, you can notice that a lot of ethnicities, for example, or yeah, people just group up with their own their own people. So that tend to happen a lot with like other Chinese students in particular. And so there was a lot of talk about Chinese students, which obviously is rude. Um, and I met a lot of Chinese students who had amazing English and all of that stuff, but all of those rumors and stereotypes and archetypes kind of build up. And so in the beginning, when I first started uni at UQ, it was like, um, I was proud of where I was coming, and in a way, it was like I've made it so far. Like I'm 16,000 kilometers away from home. So when they would ask you who are domestic students and who are international students, because it's a very common question, again, because Australia is a destination for education. So many people just come to study to Australia. That's one of their biggest exports. And so I would really proudly and really openly like raise my hand and be like, yeah, I'm an international student. And obviously class introduction, sometimes they wouldn't even ask, but I would just say it. And so people are nice to you and they don't care until they have to work with you. And so a lot of times, it's fine when people correct you, but some people are just so vigilant of what you're doing all the time. But the moment it really hit me was I got my first internship in a radio program. So that hit to a lot of like that really hit a lot of my anxieties together, which was okay, now I have to go live on radio. And it's like a whole different deal when you can't prepare what you're going to say. But when you go live and when you actually have to speak in the spur of the moment, you get nervous and then you mess up and things like that. And it was a pretty simple job. We really just had to write like some news bulletins, hourly news bulletins. And so we didn't really have to go out the office or anything. It was like find like three or four local stories, three or four regional, state stories, and then three or four international. And we were usually a team of 4 or 5 people. And so I had the same people for the amount of weeks I was working with them. And when on my first couple of weeks, there was this guy, he eventually moved to a different team because, schedule conflicts and all of that. And we all were working under the same document, Google Doc. So, you can see what everyone else is doing. And look, we're all rookies here. Like none of us are actually journalists. This is sort of the first times that we get to test ourselves, and for me even bigger because I did study journalism back home. So that's the funny thing. Like I even have a bit of an advantage over them. I know more, but people assume that I don't, and I don't go around saying like, "Hey, I know more than you," kind of thing. So the only difference is I'm testing it out in a different language. And so we started like drafting our stories and everything. And this guy doesn't even say anything to me. He just goes and looks at my paragraph and deletes everything and rewrites it. So he didn't even ask me or tell me, hey, I think this is wrong, or I think you should change this structure, or I think this would sound better. He didn't say anything. He knew I write it because obviously in a Google Doc, everything's labeled with the last person who edited, and all of that. He deleted it and just rewrote it. And wow, that blew me away. That made me so mad. Um, so yeah, that was one of the first times where I really felt that difference. Because obviously, when we introduced ourselves to the team, I told them, oh, I'm from Colombia. Oh, cool. And then this other girl in the team, oh, I've been to Colombia. I speak Spanish. And I'm like, oh, cool. So they know. And yeah, that was the first experience. Like I was just lucky that this guy got moved to a different team. Like he asked to be moved to a different team. But yeah, I never got to really address it because I felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. because I also was worried, like, who's gonna believe me and who's gonna think, like, people are gonna think that I'm just wanting to make drama or anything. You're in a group of new people who don't know you. So I avoided it, and it didn't happen again because he left. And the rest of the team were quite nice. But with them, I got my say, as well, being like, oh, I think you shouldn't use this, maybe change it to this, as well as they were like, no, this doesn't sound right, switch it up. And they helped me a lot with pronunciation as well. But the biggest thing is because it was community radio, it, it and I was so concerned about how am I going to come across? People are going to notice my accent, notice that I'm not Australian, not even American. And I remember um one of the people that worked for that radio station was like, no, we're community radio, so we legitimately like diversity. Don't try to disguise your accent. Like, that's fine, like, put it out there, because it's pretty cool. And that also did a whole mind shift.
Hmm.
And professionally it happens as well. Like, over the years, and because of those experiences, I kind of learned, like, I'm not embarrassed of where I come from. I'm not embarrassed. Like, I'm really proud of my background, but I don't go out of my way and say it unless I'm actually asked. Like, I'm not going to hide it, but I'm not going to come out and say it, because I know how people act, even in a medium as mine, because they think, if this is not your first language, your native language, and you're doing a job that completely relies on language, then it's kind of iffy for people. They think, oh, then you must not be that great or as prepared or as good as I am. And so I avoid saying it. People do stop me sometimes and they ask me, oh, well, mid-interview, and be like, oh, where's that accent from? Where do you come from? And I tell them, and some people are really cool about it and they don't really care and just move on, just wanted to know. And then other people just ask questions and things like that. But you see it mostly with your colleagues. Um, I know they don't particularly say anything to me, but I think I am sort of an underdog in the game because I work for a really small paper, so I'm fighting kind of like the mainstream media to begin with. And on top of that, I'm on those interviews and press conferences, and I have to go out, and you can tell I have an accent, and sometimes I mess up my sentences, and I know I'm messing them up, but I'm not going to stop everything and be like, no, 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 let's retrace. So this is actually how this is said. And so, yeah, I'm not one of the popular kids really, but that's pretty cool still. I think it's I try to see it as, um I can do this, but could they do this in my language? Which I could.
Hmm.
If the roles were reversed and I was home, I could do this, and then I can come here and do it as well, but could you? So I try to get in that mindset.
And would you say that's the biggest thing that helps you, let's say, move on and get over it in a sense that, okay, I'm here, I'm doing a great job. Like you said, I got hired, I'm working here, I'm part of a team, I'm doing my job as I'm supposed to be doing it, but they maybe could not. Is that your biggest, like you said, that mindset that helps you out, or is there something else that helps you in that situation?
Well, I think the foundation of everything should be, how much you study and how much effort you put. I'm not gonna
Mm,
lie and tell you people, like, I do feel like I have an affinity for the language, but that's never enough. That kind of thing is never enough.
mm,
Talent is not gonna take you. And you look, I'm not like innately talented at journalism. So basically I'm still at ground zero. But I think it's kind of the fact that through university, I actually learned what academic English was, which gave me, like, it broadened my vocabulary to begin with, which was amazing because I just knew very casual kind of, yeah, street kind of English. And then now I knew academic, how to write academically, broaden vocabulary. And so I kind of started challenging myself in my essays and things like that. And if I read my first essays, I'm like, this is a mess, and I can't believe I passed. And then I see the last ones, and now that I've been working in the medium for a while as well, I'm like, this is a mess, but obviously not as bad as it was before. So I think it's like you really need to keep pushing it. Like, I have so many friends that are Spanish speaking here, and they all were like, oh, I'm just so embarrassed to talk. Like, do it anyways, do it anyways. Because there ain't no other way. Like, my dad always said, like, it's worth it just to get a little bit red for just a couple of minutes, and but find out, like actually find out, then instead of remaining with that doubt of like, could I have not. And I saw once this quote that said, English is a language, not a measure of intelligence. And that's something I like to live by. A language is just a language. Like, I have abilities just like everybody else. Like, I went through school, went through an undergrad program, and I did it in both languages. And so I think my accent does not define me, and my background does not define me, although people think my country is like poor and uneducated. So it's like, English to me is just a language and a tool, but it does not define if I'm smart or not, which is how people have been seeing it for so long. So for people who are like shy about it, I would say, like, it's a language. It does not make you any less or more, right? You still have all of the same abilities that you had before, all of the same talents and qualities. So the only difference is you're trying to learn, and they already know that. So yeah, obviously I always go back to that. Like, I am bilingual, and people just don't understand how much that broadens your horizons in so many ways, which is like, I can now move, you easily between two languages. Every night I call my parents, right? And I get to talk to them. And that's a normal day for me, and my language is still there. And then I go the next day to work, and the first thing that I get is my editor talking to me. So, and it's that fact that eventually you start noticing the changes of like, wow, I can understand slang. I can make jokes that are actually funny, that make sense to people. You even find out that the sayings that you have in your own country, because we're big on proverbs and
Hmm.
sayings, that you thought you couldn't translate. They exist. They just are said different, but they
Yeah.
exist. And you start learning all of these things that cross over. So I think I always go back to, I am bilingual. This person speaks one language. Yeah, they're very good at it, but so am I in my native language. I have two, and that makes me so much better at so many other things, and makes it easier for me to also jump into another language if I wanted to start learning. So I think it's always about that. English is not a measure of your intelligence. And you have such a huge advantage, even if it's just knowing the basics of another language. You have such an advantage over millions of people who can only speak one language.
I would say that this last maybe 10 minutes or so would be wonderful to rewind and listen to every day because honestly, everything that you just said here is something that I think most everybody that's learning a language needs to hear. Like you said, that it's not, oh, I'm stupid and I can't do this simply because maybe you use the wrong sentence structure, which is a very good thing that you mentioned that, you're looking at yourself as bilingual, that it's not just this one language that you're using, which, like you said, if we talk about Spanish, obviously you're much better than they are. And I read something similar in a book recently, and I really loved the comparison that they were talking about somebody that's monolingual and bilingual, and how it's a kind of a apples to oranges comparison because a bilingual person doesn't carry a monolingual's brain along with their own, but you have just one that has to carry both. And so it's something that a lot of people, I think, strive towards to be fluent, to speak like a native, and so on and so on. And of course, that's a great goal to have and to keep improving and to keep speaking better. But realistically, I mean, it's not the same thing. I mean, you can't compare yourself because you will never be a native speaker. You can speak like one, maybe with enough practice and so on, but you will never actually be that person, which is a great thing, like you said, to keep reminding yourself of.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people I think it's like the wrong kind of ideal that they've put in the migrant's brain, at
Hmm.
least. Like, you won't be respected, you won't be accepted if you don't sound like them or look like them and all of that kind of stuff. But things are changing so very much. So I feel like carrying your accent, for example, it's like the best way to carry your own flag. The fact that people can still say, oh, this person is from there. Yeah, because that's where you come from. And that should be something to feel so proud about, that you can actually, you made that transition and you now make it look easy, but it's been a whole journey to get there. And again, like, it's that moment where you realize I can have thoughts in both languages, um, depending on the situation. Sometimes I'm thinking of something, like something happens to me or whatever, and the saying or a proverb or something comes to my head and it's in Spanish, but I'm still speaking in English, or vice versa, because I've gotten used to the language and I interact with it every day. Um, live through a situation and I come up with something in my brain that shows up in English, but then I can talk to my parents and explain it in Spanish. So how is that not the most amazing thing? Even if it's like super basic, even if it's saying like, hello, my name is, because I know a lot of people would be like, yeah, but you kind of already had a thing for it. I understand that, because I had so many classmates that were so good at so many things that are so valued, like math and things like that,
Hmm.
numbers, engineering and things like that, that I never had. But then again, as I said before, having a bit of a talent is not enough. Like, it may be enough in school, but once you have to make that crossover to the real world and to professional world, you can't survive only on liking it or knowing a little bit about it. You really have to try it out there. And I obviously, like everyone else, I've had my embarrassing moments. I still do, and I still get really shy, and I still get really awkward, and I make a lot of mistakes. And the hardest part for me is like going to press conferences still. I'm confident that if I go and I sit down, I can write one story and I can reread it and find mistakes and fix it and learn from that. But it's easier because you have the time and you're sitting down only with yourself. It's a bit more scary when you're addressing somebody that's, I don't know, a politician or something, and you want to sound so good. Um, but I still have to go to work every day and do it again. And it's the only way that one day I'm not gonna feel like an outsider, but feel like,
Hmm.
yeah, I sound like this, but I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm saying. Um, yeah.
Perfect. And do you have any last, maybe, words of wisdom, any last pieces of advice for anybody listening?
Sure. I think tips that I would give, even if as someone who honestly has learned on her own, and I guess you could say that again, I have a knack for it, would be, you know, just listen to a lot of music that you like and question yourself. Like, just do not just listen to it. Think about, like, I want to know what it says, and go and find like stupid like YouTube videos with lyrics so you can know each part what it says, and then you'll catch, even if you don't think so, you'll catch onto something. Something will latch, and you'll remember this one word, and I don't know, it starts showing up everywhere. You'll realize that it starts showing up everywhere. So yeah, media is your friend. Watch, if you like, I don't know, streamers, watch streamers in English. If you like music in English, watch music, like listen to music in English. Find out what the lyrics are saying. And if you're watching Netflix and stuff, put the closed captions in English. You may think that you're not gonna catch it, but when you're reading them, you actually realize that there are so many words that you actually do know, that maybe you just couldn't catch the pronunciation, but you will. And don't be afraid of like sounding this way or that way. That's not the main point. Um, there's gonna be people who are rude and won't want to make the effort to understand you, and that's whatever. Like, it's gonna affect us all, and we're gonna get mad about it for a little bit. But I feel like there's always that feeling of like, whatever. Always go back and thinking, even if it's like out of spite, that they made like I can do this in both languages. Can you? You can't. You can't, but I can. So do it out of spite, and don't shut up. Even if you think you sound ridiculous, and if you sound bad, that's the only thing, that's the only way you're gonna get better. And one tip that I find really important for my migrant friends is surround yourself by people that don't speak your same language. Don't live with people who, like in my case, I know Colombians love living with other Colombians. Don't do that. You're doing yourself such a big damage. Like, don't do it. Force yourself to put like to be in those situations, not only for a little bit, but as much as you can. So if you're at home having to talk in English, do it. And honestly, that opens you up to so many cultures and so many cool things. Like I've met so many people from around the world. I've met people from Japan and from the Philippines and from Iran and from other South American countries and Australians and Americans and this and that. So you're missing out. If you were to want to hang out only with the people from your own country, then you would have stayed in your country. So allow yourself to live the culture. And the only way you're going to do that is by being, willing to embarrass yourself a little bit. And mostly if you're surrounded by other people who are in the same situation as you, they're not going to care because they all want to practice. So do that.
Was insanely valuable. I really very, very much appreciate you sharing all of this. So I will add all the links below to, like you said, to LinkedIn, to anything else that you wish to share. And other than that, thank you very much for your time. I very, very much appreciate everything that you shared with us. And I find it very ironic that your first message to me was, I don't know how valuable this can be. And it's been insanely valuable. So I very, very much appreciate you meeting with me today.
No, no worries. Thank you so much. I had fun.
Hey, I'm glad to see you here. Let me know what you most enjoyed about this conversation, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Do zobaczenia.